My millionaire son bought me a house. 3 months later, he died in a car crash. The very next day, his wife showed up on my porch with her new boyfriend. Savannah, Savvy, as she liked to be called, snatched the key out of my hand with a smile that could freeze over hell, while Andrew, her new beau, cackled behind her like a well-dressed hyena. This house is mine now, Carol. Go mourn your dead kid somewhere else. She spat those words out with the venom only a highly trained viper could distill. I left without saying a single word, dragging my suitcase across the lawn I had lovingly planted myself. But my tiny hidden cameras stayed exactly where I had placed them 3 days before. And let me tell you, the police absolutely loved the show they captured. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe. But allow me to rewind a little bit to explain how I became the woman who engineered the most satisfying takedown in modern history. My name is Carol Riley. I'm 58 years old, and up until 3 months ago, I thought I was a lucky widow with a millionaire son who adored me. How naive I was. It all started last December when Mike, my only son, showed up at my small San Diego condo with a mysterious smile and a key in his hand. "Mom," he said, "I bought a house in La Jolla. It's for you." The house was everything I never thought I could have. 3 bedrooms, a massive yard, a 2-car garage, and a kitchen that looks straight out of Architectural Digest. "Sweetheart, this is too much," I told him. But he insisted. "Mom, I worked my whole life so I could give you this. Please, let me make you happy." I moved in that January, and for 2.5 months I lived like a queen. I decorated every corner with love, planted roses in the garden, and invited my sisters over for dinner in my elegant dining room. Mike came over every Sunday with Savannah, his wife of 2 years, and I'd cook their favorite meals. But something about Savannah always bothered me. The way she looked at my new house like she was calculating the price of every piece of furniture, every detail. The way she'd interrupt when Mike and I talked about family memories, as if she wanted to erase our past together. By February, I started noticing strange changes. Mike would show up tense, arguing on the phone in low whispers, and when I asked what was wrong, he'd just say, "Work problems, Mom, nothing serious." Savannah, on the other hand, looked more relaxed every day, more smiley, like a cat who had just figured out where the cream was stored. My mother's instincts started ringing like emergency alarms, but I had no idea what was coming. On March 15th, a Tuesday I'll never forget, I got the call that changed everything. "Mrs. Riley, your son was in a car accident. He's at Sharp Memorial Hospital." I drove like a maniac. I arrived soaked in rain and tears, but it was already too late. Mike had died instantly, according to the police report. An 18-wheeler had rear-ended him on the I-5 near Camp Pendleton. "Accident?" they said. "Bad luck?" they said. But something in Savannah's eyes when she arrived at the hospital, something about her performance as the heartbroken widow, made me wonder if it had truly been an accident. During the funeral, as I sobbed over my only child's coffin, I noticed something that chilled me to the bone. Savannah didn't shed a single genuine tear. I knew what real grief looked like after losing my husband 10 years earlier. What I saw in Savannah was cheap theater. But the moment that truly confirmed my suspicions was when I heard her talking on the phone in the funeral home restroom. "It's done," she whispered. "Now we just have to wait a little while, and everything will be ours." That night, after the burial, while Savannah played the perfect widow receiving condolences, I made a life-altering decision. I bought 4 tiny, coin-sized cameras online, complete with audio. If I was going to lose everything, I would at least discover the truth. I installed them strategically. One in the living room, one in the kitchen, one in Mike's study, where he kept important documents, and one in the yard, pointed toward the front entrance. All of them had a 30-day recording capacity and real-time streaming to my phone. 3 days after installing the cameras, Savannah knocked on my door, accompanied by a man I'd never seen. Tall, dark, with a toothpaste commercial smile that screamed "scam artist" from miles away. "Carol," Savannah said in a sugary voice dripping with poison, "meet Andrew Vance, my comforter during this difficult time." My stomach turned. It hadn't even been 72 hours since Mike's funeral, and this woman already had a replacement. "Look, Carol," Savannah continued, quickly dropping the sweet facade, "we need to talk about the house. Mike left it to me in the will." A lie. I knew Mike had never drawn up a will. He always said he was too young to think about that stuff. So you're going to have to find somewhere else to live. Nothing personal. Andrew and I just need our space to heal. The way she said heal while leaning into this stranger made me want to throw up. But I smiled, offered them coffee, and acted like the submissive mother-in-law they expected. Meanwhile, my cameras were already capturing every word, every gesture, and every lie that came out of their mouths. And when I finally left my own house, dragging my shattered dignity, I knew this wasn't over. In fact, it was just beginning. You see, darlings, there's something Savannah didn't know about me. Before I got married and became a devoted mom, I spent 10 years working as an insurance investigator. And if I learned one thing in those years, it's that guilty people always make mistakes when they think no one is watching. And now I had the perfect electronic eyes watching their every move in the house my son bought for me. What those cameras captured in the next 48 hours was more revealing than I could have ever imagined. For the next 2 days, while I slept on my sister Rose's uncomfortable couch and pretended to be devastated by my daughter-in-law's generosity, my little electronic spies worked better than any private detective I could have hired. And believe me, what they recorded made everything start to make sense in the most nauseating way possible. The first revelation came barely 6 hours after I'd been thrown out like a stray dog. I was in Rose's kitchen, pretending to be interested in her chatter about grocery prices, when my phone vibrated with a camera notification. I excused myself and locked myself in the bathroom to check. What I saw took the air right out of my lungs. Savannah and Andrew were in my living room, clinking glasses with the high-end French champagne Mike had given me for Christmas, celebrating as if they'd won the lottery. I can't believe it worked so perfectly, Savannah said, raising her glass toward Mike's portrait hanging on the wall. Your plan with the brakes was brilliant, honey. Andrew smiled with that smirk I'd seen on criminals during my years investigating fraud. 3 years of mechanical engineering school had to be good for something, right? A little snip to the brake line cable, oil on the pavement at the exact curve on the I-5, and voila, a perfectly believable accident. My hand started shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. They had murdered Mike. My son hadn't died in an accident. These monsters had killed him in cold blood. And there they were, in the house he'd bought for me with so much love, celebrating their perfect crime as if it were their honeymoon. But that wasn't all. The recording continued with details that gave me goosebumps. Are you sure no one suspects anything? Andrew asked, pouring more champagne. Please, Savannah laughed. Carol is a silly old woman who can't see past her soap operas. Mike was so naive he never suspected a thing, even when I started dating him, knowing perfectly well he was a millionaire. The research I did on his company before meeting him was worth every penny I paid that private investigator. My blood ran cold. Savannah had researched Mike before meeting him. Their love at first sight at that business conference had been a planned scam from the start. Everything had been an elaborate performance to get to his money. And I, the idiotic mother-in-law who believed in fairy tales, had applauded their wedding. The $2 million life insurance policy was the best idea you ever had, Andrew continued, even if we had to wait 2 years so it wouldn't look suspicious. Patience is a virtue, Savannah replied, especially when the reward is so substantial. Besides, marrying him gave me access to all his accounts, properties, and business contacts. Mike was so trusting, he gave me full power of attorney after the first year of marriage. Rose knocked on the bathroom door. Carol, are you okay in there? Yes, sis. Just a minute. I managed to reply in a trembling voice. But I was not okay. I was discovering that my son had been courted, manipulated, and finally murdered by a woman who had planned his death since before she even knew him. And the worst part was that I had been so blind, I had even defended their marriage when my sister said Savannah looked too interested in the money. The recording continued to reveal horrors. And what do we do with the old woman? Andrew asked, referring to me as if I were a piece of cumbersome furniture. We throw her out tomorrow, Savannah replied without hesitation. But first, I need to check all of Mike's papers. It's possible he left something in her name, and we can't allow her to have any legal right to anything. Do you think she suspects? Carol is so sentimental and dumb. She still thinks her son was a saint. She has no idea how easy it was to manipulate him. Rich men with mommy issues are the world's easiest targets. You just need to pretend you adore their mothers, and you have complete access to their lives and bank accounts. Every word was like a dagger in my heart. Not only had they murdered Mike, but they were mocking his memory, his love, his kindness, and my supposed stupidity. But what they didn't know was that this silly old woman had been taking meticulous notes of every detail, every confession, every piece of evidence coming out of their criminal mouths. The second night, I captured something even more revealing. Savannah was talking on the phone with someone else, coordinating what seemed to be another plan. "The lawyer is coming tomorrow to review all the documents," she said. "I need you to have the fake will papers ready. Yes, I already transferred $800,000 to the Cayman's account. No, Carol knows nothing about Mike's offshore accounts." Offshore accounts? Mike had never mentioned money abroad. But of course, Savannah had had 2 full years to discover every financial detail of my son's life and plan how to steal every last dime. On the third day, while I pretended to be the resigned mother-in-law organizing my few possessions at Rose's house, the cameras captured the conversation that sealed their fate. Andrew and Savannah were in Mike's study, reviewing documents and laughing like hyenas. "Find anything else?" Andrew asked. $1.5 million in investments I haven't touched yet," Savannah replied. "Plus the house, which is easily worth another $1 million. And there's an additional insurance policy that no one knows about, not even his accountant. Mike was richer than I imagined." "And the police investigation?" "Closed. Traffic accident, case solved. The San Diego PD are so incompetent they didn't even check the car properly. If they had examined the brakes, they would have found the cut. But why bother with such an apparently clear-cut case?" That night, lying on Rose's couch, listening to her snoring, I made the most important decision of my life. I was not going to let these murderers enjoy a single penny of Mike's money. I was not going to let his death go unavenged. And I was definitely not going to let them underestimate me as a silly old woman for 1 minute longer. I had recordings of complete confessions of murder, fraud, and conspiracy. I had evidence of fraudulent bank accounts and fake documents. But above all, I had something Savannah had completely underestimated: years of experience investigating exactly this type of crime. The war had begun, and they didn't even know I had already chosen my weapons. The next morning, the fourth day, dawned with a clarity that reminded me why I had been so good at my investigation job. While Rose was making coffee and muttering about how awful Savannah had been to kick me out, as if I hadn't noticed, I already had a plan forming in my mind, like puzzle pieces finally clicking into place. My first stop was the bank where Mike had his main account. Armed with my ID and pretending to be the devastated mother who needed to understand her deceased son's finances, I managed to talk to the manager, Mr. Martinez, who had known Mike for years. "Mrs. Riley," he said with genuine compassion, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Mike was an exceptional client." Perfect. Compassion was exactly what I needed. "Mr. Martinez, I need to understand a few things. Savannah says Mike left her everything in a will, but I never knew he had made one." Mr. Martinez's expression shifted slightly. "A will, ma'am. Mike came in here 3 months ago specifically to ensure you were the beneficiary of all his accounts in case of an emergency. He said he didn't trust making a formal will yet, but wanted to protect you." My heart pounded. "Are you sure?" "Completely. I have the documents right here. Mike was very specific. In the event of his passing, you would inherit 80% of his assets and his wife 20%. He said it was his way of ensuring you were always protected." The room started spinning. Mike had thought of me until the end, and Savannah had been lying about the will because she knew the truth would financially destroy her. "Mr. Martinez, is it possible someone changed these documents?" "Not without Mike's physical presence and 2 witnesses. These papers are legally bulletproof." I left the bank with a smile I couldn't contain. Savannah had played her cards too quickly. Her greed had made her commit the classic rookie criminal error, assuming no one would verify her lies. But my joy didn't last long. That afternoon, while reviewing the camera recordings, I captured something that chilled my blood. Savannah was on the phone with someone, and her tone had changed completely. She was no longer the acting, grieving widow. She was a cold businesswoman discussing numbers. "The problem is the old woman," she was saying, walking around my kitchen as if she owned it. "If she finds out about the bank, everything gets complicated. We need to speed up the process." The voice on the other end was masculine, but it wasn't Andrew. "What do you suggest?" "The same thing that worked with Mike. Accidents happen, especially to women her age." My blood turned to liquid ice. Not only had they murdered Mike, now they were planning to kill me too. The silly old woman had become an obstacle that needed to be permanently eliminated. When? The voice asked. Soon. But it has to look natural. Carol is too healthy for her age, so it needs to be something credible. Maybe a slip on her sister's stairs or a sudden heart problem. The casualness with which they discussed my murder, as if they were planning what to have for dinner, made me realize this wasn't the first time they'd had these kinds of conversations. That night at Rose's house, I pretended to be drinking chamomile tea for my nerves while I was actually investigating on my laptop. If Savannah thought she had killed the only son of a professional investigator and was going to get away with it, she was crazier than I thought. First, I searched for everything I could find on Andrew Vance. What I discovered confirmed my worst suspicions. Andrew had a record of minor fraud, but more importantly, he had been married twice before. His first wife had died in a domestic accident, a fall down the stairs, and his second wife had mysteriously disappeared after emptying her bank accounts. The pattern was clear. Andrew was a professional killer who specialized in rich widows. But Savannah wasn't a victim. She was his partner, and together they had turned murder into a family business. My investigation into Savannah was even more revealing. Her real name was Savannah Jones, and before meeting Mike, she had been married to a businessman in Scottsdale, Arizona, who had died in a car crash identical to Mike's. The life insurance payout had been $1.5 million, and Savannah had vanished from Scottsdale immediately after collecting. I found the complete pattern. Savannah would research wealthy, single men, play the perfect woman, marry them, wait the minimum time for the life insurance to be valid, and then Andrew would execute the perfect accident. Then they would disappear with the money until they found the next victim. Mike had been literally next on the list of a sophisticated criminal operation, and I had been so naive that I had clapped at their wedding. But now I had information they didn't know I possessed. I knew about the offshore accounts, the fake documents, the previous murders, and most importantly, I knew they were planning to kill me. The difference was that I had spent 10 years investigating exactly this type of crime, and I knew that arrogance was always the weakness of clever criminals. Savannah and Andrew had become so sure of their methods that they were making basic mistakes. Mistake number 1, they hadn't researched my professional past. If they had, they would have known I knew exactly how to build a solid criminal case. Mistake number 2, they had underestimated a mother's love. They could fool lovesick husbands, but seeking revenge for the murder of my only son was completely different. Mistake number 3, they had assumed their recorded confessions were private. My tiny cameras were still working perfectly, capturing every incriminating word that came out of their mouths. That night, before sleeping on Rose's uncomfortable couch, I reviewed my plan one more time. I had enough evidence to legally destroy them, but I also had information about their plans to murder me. I couldn't wait for the justice system to act slowly while they plotted my death. No, this required a more direct approach. Unfortunately, my years as an investigator had taught me that sometimes the best justice is served with a personal touch. The question wasn't whether I was going to win this war. The question was how much they were going to suffer when they discovered they had underestimated the wrong mother. On the 4th day of living as a refugee at my sister's house, while Savannah and Andrew strolled through my home like the new owners of the universe, I received a call that changed the whole game. It was attorney Daniel Hayes, the lawyer who had handled Mike's legal affairs for years. "Mrs. Riley," he said in a serious voice, "I need to see you urgently. There are irregularities in the handling of Mike's estate that require your immediate attention." My heart raced. "What kind of irregularities?" "I prefer to discuss it in person. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" Rose insisted on coming with me, probably because she had noticed I'd been acting strange lately. If she knew I was planning the sweetest revenge in modern criminal history, she would understand the mysterious smile I couldn't wipe off my face. Attorney Hayes' office was everything you'd expect from a successful lawyer. Books stacked to the ceiling, impressive diplomas, and a desk that probably cost more than Rose's car. But what interested me were the documents scattered in front of him, all marked with Mike's name. "Mrs. Riley," he began, taking off his glasses to clean them, "Mike came to see me 4 months ago, very concerned about certain discoveries he had made about his wife." I held my breath. "Discoveries?" "Your son hired a private investigator to verify some inconsistencies in Savannah's personal history. What he found alarmed him enough to come to me for legal counsel. The attorney handed me a thick folder. Mike discovered that Savannah had been previously married to a man named Robert Mason in Scottsdale. Mr. Mason died in a car accident very similar to Mike's, and Savannah collected a considerable life insurance payout. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Inside were photographs, marriage documents, insurance reports, and most shocking, a photo of Savannah with Andrew taken 6 months before she met Mike. They hadn't been recent lovers. They had been criminal partners from the beginning. Mike was worried, the attorney continued, but he didn't want to act rashly. He asked me to prepare protective documents for you, specifically a trust that would guarantee your financial security no matter what happened to him. A trust? Mike established an emergency fund of $500,000 in your name, completely separate from any other assets. Furthermore, he gave me another document. He changed his will the week before he died. Savannah inherits nothing. Everything goes to you, with the specific condition that if anything happened to you under suspicious circumstances, an automatic private investigation would be triggered. The room started spinning. Mike had known. My son had discovered the danger and had tried to protect me from the grave. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? Because Mike specifically asked me to wait 1 week after the funeral before contacting you. He said he needed time to process the situation, but if something happened to him, it was crucial that you knew the truth immediately. The attorney handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Mike's handwriting. This is for you. Mike asked me to give it to you along with this information. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope. Mike's letter was short but devastating. Mom, if you're reading this, it means my suspicions about Savannah were correct and something has happened to me. I didn't want to worry you while I was investigating, but I discovered my wife is not who she says she is. She is a professional scam artist, possibly worse. I have taken precautions to protect you financially, but please be very careful. Savannah is dangerous, and I'm sure she has accomplices. Trust Attorney Hayes and no one else. I love you, Mom. Protect yourself. Mike. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of maternal pride and murderous fury. My son had been smarter than all of us. He had discovered the trap before he died and had left me the tools to destroy his killers. Attorney Hayes, I said, wiping my tears, I need to tell you something important. And I told him everything. The cameras, the recordings, the confessions of murder, the plans to kill me, the offshore accounts, everything. Attorney Hayes listened in silence, taking meticulous notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair with an expression of astonishment and horror. Mrs. Riley, what you are describing is a high-level criminal operation. These recordings are enough evidence to arrest them for murder, but we need to act very carefully. What do you recommend? First, you need to be in a safe place. If they are truly planning to kill you, you can't stay at your sister's house. And then we build a perfect case. We have the recordings, I have Mike's documents, and with the prior investigation he ordered, we can demonstrate premeditation and a criminal pattern. But I had a better idea. Attorney, what would happen if Savannah tried to execute the fake will documents? That would be document fraud, on top of everything else. Why? Because I have recordings of her planning to do exactly that tomorrow. A slow smile spread across Attorney Hayes' face. Mrs. Riley, I think we can turn this into a perfect trap. Are you willing to help us catch them in the act? That night, I returned to Rose's house, but not as the defeated widow who had left that morning. I returned as a woman with a plan, with resources, and with her son's posthumous blessing to seek justice. The cameras captured a conversation between Savannah and Andrew that night that confirmed I had made the right decision. Mike's lawyer's coming tomorrow, Savannah was saying. We're going to present the fake will and officially claim everything. What if he asks about the old woman? We'll tell him she's too traumatized to come. By the time she realizes what happened, we'll have transferred everything and disappeared. And the plan to eliminate her? This week. We need her to sign some documents first, so there are no legal loose ends. My skin prickled as I listened to the coldness with which they discussed my murder, but I also felt a deep satisfaction, because what they didn't know was that every word was being recorded, documented, and prepared to be presented to a judge. The game had completely changed. I was no longer the victim fleeing predators. Now I was the hunter, and they had walked directly into my perfectly designed trap. Tomorrow they were going to discover exactly who they had messed with. The morning of the fifth day arrived with that crystal clarity that only comes on days when you know you are about to witness pure justice. While Rose was making me breakfast, completely unaware that her sister was about to orchestrate the most satisfying downfall in modern criminal history, I reviewed the recordings that would seal Mike's killer's fate one last time. Attorney Hayes had coordinated everything perfectly. At 10 a.m., he would show up at the house for the supposed reading of Mike's fake will. But what Savannah and Andrew didn't know was that he would be accompanied by Detective Miller of the San Diego PD, disguised as his legal assistant, and that every word would be recorded by both my cameras and the official police equipment. At 9:30, while pretending to be in Rose's kitchen preparing for my widow's nerves, I was actually monitoring the cameras in real time from my phone. Savannah and Andrew were reviewing the fake documents one last time, rehearsing their performances as the heartbroken widow and the comforting boyfriend. "Remember," Andrew told Savannah, "you have to cry when they mention Mike's name, but not too much, just enough to look brave." "Please," Savannah laughed. "I've been perfecting this performance for 2 years. The lawyer is going to be so impressed with my grief he won't even question the documents." If they had known that every word was being broadcast live to the police, they probably would have run to the airport right then and there. At 9:45, I received a message from the attorney. "Team in position, proceed." It was my signal to begin the final phase of the operation. I called Savannah from Rose's phone, putting on my best defeated mother-in-law voice. "Savannah, I need to come pick up a few things from the house before the will reading." "Carol," she replied with that fake, condescending voice, "I already told you that you can't come here. Andrew and I need privacy to emotionally prepare." "Please," I begged, hating every second of feigning submission to my son's killer. "It will only be 5 minutes. I need to get Mike's photos from my bedroom. That's all I have left of him." There was a pause. I could hear Savannah calculating, probably thinking that my presence during the will reading might be beneficial for her performance. "Fine," she finally said, "but only 5 minutes, and don't touch anything else." Perfect. My presence during the trap was not originally planned, but it would be the icing on the cake for this operation. I arrived at my house at 9:55, carrying a small bag as if I were picking up a few sentimental belongings. What I was really carrying was an additional recording device Detective Miller had given me, and the satisfaction of knowing that in 5 minutes everything would be over. Savannah opened the door with a smile that could freeze over hell. She wore a black dress, appropriate for a widow, impeccable makeup, and played the role of the shattered woman with a precision that would have impressed the best soap opera actresses. "Carol," she said in a trembling voice, "thank you for coming. I know this is difficult for both of us." Andrew appeared behind her, also dressed appropriately for the financial funeral they were planning to execute. "I'm just going for the photos," I mumbled, heading toward the stairs. But before I reached the first step, the doorbell rang. Savannah and Andrew exchanged nervous glances. "It must be the lawyer," Savannah said, smoothing her dress. "Carol, please stay. Maybe it's better if you hear this directly." Oh, if she only knew how much I was going to hear. Savannah opened the door with her best brave widow smile. "Attorney Hayes, thank you for coming during this difficult time." "Mrs. Vance," the attorney replied with perfect professional seriousness, "I'm very sorry about the circumstances. This is my assistant, Mr. Miller." Detective Miller, disguised in an impeccable suit and carrying a legal briefcase, nodded solemnly. "My condolences, ma'am." We all headed to the living room, where Savannah had prepared a small table with the fake documents perfectly arranged. Andrew sat beside her in a show of emotional support, and I settled into the armchair where I had watched so many movie nights with Mike. "Very well," Attorney Hayes began, opening his briefcase. "Let us proceed with the reading of Mr. Michael Riley's will." He took out a document that I knew was fake, but that Savannah believed was her golden ticket. "Mike made his intentions very clear," the attorney continued. "According to this document, his wife, Savannah Vance, inherits the entirety of his assets, including bank accounts, properties, and investments." Savannah began to cry delicately, wiping away tears that I'm sure were as fake as her love for Mike. "My Mike was so generous," she sobbed, always thinking of my well-being." Andrew squeezed her hand in a gesture of consolation, that made me want to throw up. However, the attorney added, there are a few legal aspects we need to clarify before proceeding with the transfer of assets. Savannah's expression changed slightly. Legal aspects? Yes, you see, we have found some inconsistencies in certain financial documents belonging to Mike. Apparently, he made some significant transfers in the days leading up to his death that need to be verified. Savannah and Andrew exchanged quick glances. I could see panic beginning to filter into their carefully controlled expressions. What kind of transfers? Andrew asked, speaking for the first time. Well, the attorney said, taking out more documents, transfers to offshore accounts, changes in insurance beneficiaries, and most interestingly, the installation of a security monitoring system in this house. The color completely drained from Savannah's face. Monitoring system? Yes, Detective Miller intervened, dropping his disguise as a legal assistant. A monitoring system that has been recording very interesting conversations over the past few days. The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Savannah and Andrew remained completely motionless, like marble statues that had just realized they were in the wrong museum. Detective Miller, San Diego Police Department, he continued, showing his badge. Savannah Vance and Andrew Vance are under arrest for the murders of Michael Riley and Robert Mason, among other charges. What happened next was like a symphony of justice played in the perfect key. Savannah tried to deny everything. Andrew tried to flee through the back door, and both were met by more police officers than I'd seen since my time as an investigator. But the best part of all was the expression on Savannah's face when she realized I was smiling. Not the timid smile of the submissive mother-in-law they had known, but the satisfied smile of a professional who had just executed the perfect case. How? That was all she managed to say. Never underestimate a mother who loved her son, I replied. And definitely never underestimate a retired professional investigator who knows exactly how to build a criminal case. As they were led away in handcuffs, Savannah screamed about legal rights and false accusations. Andrew had opted for silence, probably because he knew every additional word would only confirm his guilt. But I was at peace. Mike had been avenged, justice had been served, and these two monsters would never be able to destroy another family. The house was silent for the first time in days. A clean silence, free of the poison that had contaminated every corner since Mike's death. It was time to start the next chapter of my life. The days following the arrest unfolded like a movie I never thought I would be starring in. The story went viral on local news. 58-year-old woman traps son's killers using hidden cameras. It sounded like a soap opera title, but it was my real life. And I must admit I enjoyed every moment of attention that was taken away from those criminals. Rose couldn't believe her quiet sister had orchestrated a full police operation. Carol, she told me while we watched the news on her TV, when exactly did you learn to be an international spy? I'm not a spy, I replied, laughing. I'm just a very angry mother with professional training. But the real satisfaction came 3 days later when Detective Miller called me to the station to review additional evidence they had found during the search of Andrew's home. Mrs. Riley, he said, showing me folders full of documents, what you handed us was just the tip of the iceberg. We have found evidence of at least 5 more cases of murder for money in the last 8 years. My satisfaction turned to horror. 5 more cases! Robert Mason in Scottsdale was just the previous one. Before him, there were 3 more men in different cities, and after Mike, they were already investigating their next victim in Miami. I sat heavily on the uncomfortable plastic chair at the police station. They had turned murder into a commercial operation. Mike hadn't been an isolated victim. He had been the next customer on a production line of death. What impresses us the most, the detective continued, is the sophistication of the operation. They had professional forged documents, contacts in multiple banks to facilitate quick transfers, and detailed knowledge of life insurance laws in different states. Are you going to be able to prosecute all the cases? With the evidence you provided, plus what we've found, we are certain they will never leave prison. Both are going to face multiple counts of first-degree murder. I left the station with a strange feeling. I had won. Mike had been avenged, and 2 serial killers were in prison forever. But I also realized that now I had to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. The house was officially mine again. Attorney Hayes had handled all the legal aspects, and Mike's bank accounts were being transferred according to his real wishes. I was richer than I had imagined, but also lonelier than I had been in years. That night, sitting in the living room where it all began, I decided to do something I'd been putting off since Mike's death. Go through his personal belongings. Savannah had touched everything looking for financial documents, but she hadn't paid attention to the things that truly mattered. On his desk, I found letters I had never seen, including one addressed to me, dated a week before his death. Mom, if you're reading this, I hope you know that every day of my life was filled with the love you gave me. I bought you this house, not because you needed a place to live, but because I wanted you to have the home you deserved after sacrificing so much for me. If Savannah ever tries to take what is yours, fight back. You are stronger and smarter than anyone imagines, including me. I love you, Mom. Protect yourself. I cried for the first time since the funeral. Not tears of sadness, but tears of gratitude. Mike had known me better than I knew myself. The next day, I received an unexpected call. Mrs. Riley, this is Attorney Martinez from the District Attorney's Office. We have a proposal that might interest you. A proposal? Your work on this case has been exceptional. We are looking for civilian consultants for cases of marital fraud and murder for hire. The pattern you identified has helped us solve 3 additional cold cases. My heart raced. Are you offering me a job? Not a consulting job, yes. Cases like your son's are more common than people think, and we need investigators with your experience and personal motivation. It was tempting. Using my pain to help other families, turning Mike's death into something that could save lives. But I also knew I needed time to heal, to discover who Carol Riley was when she wasn't being a mother or an investigator. Attorney, I appreciate the offer, but I need time to think about it. Of course. The offer will remain open when you are ready. That night, while dining alone in my dining room with my good china that I could now use whenever I wanted, I made a decision that would have horrified the Carol of 6 months ago. I was going to sell the house. Not because it held bad memories, but because every room reminded me it was meant for a dependent woman who needed to be rescued. But I had proven that I didn't need to be rescued. I could rescue myself and help rescue others too. Mike had given me the house because he wanted me to have the home I deserved. But the home I deserved was one I chose, not one I was given out of pity or love. With the sale of the house and Mike's inheritance, I would have enough money to do whatever I wanted for the rest of my life. I could travel, I could study, I could start a business, or I could accept the DA's offer and dedicate my expertise to catching more criminals like Savannah and Andrew. But first, I had one last conversation to have with my son's killers. Detective Miller had explained that I had the right to read a victim impact statement during sentencing. It was my opportunity to look Savannah and Andrew in the eyes and tell them exactly what I thought of them. I had so much to say. The trial date was set for 6 weeks away, enough time to prepare them for the speech of their lives. Because if they thought trapping them had been satisfying, they should wait to hear what I planned to tell them in front of a judge, a jury, and the news cameras. Legal justice had been served, but personal justice was just beginning. I spent the 6 weeks before the trial doing something I never thought I would, preparing to be the star of my own justice show. Detective Miller had connected me with a psychologist specializing in victims of violent crime, not because I needed therapy, but because I wanted to ensure my statement was devastatingly effective. Mrs. Riley, Dr. Fernandez told me during our 3rd session, it's important that you understand this statement isn't just for you. It's for all the future victims these criminals will not be able to harm because of your bravery. She was right, of course, but I also had a much more personal motivation. I wanted Savannah and Andrew to know exactly who they had messed with before spending the rest of their lives in prison. During those weeks, I also made another important decision. I accepted the consulting offer from the district attorney's office, but with my own conditions. I would work on selected cases, maintain my independence, and dedicate my time to creating an investigation protocol that could help other families recognize the signs before it was too late. Rose thought I had gone crazy. Carol, you already caught the killers. Why don't you relax? Travel to Europe? Find a nice boyfriend? Because sis, I explained while reviewing the files of similar cases the DA had sent me. It turns out I'm really good at this. And there are too many Savannahs in the world for me to retire now. The truth was that for the first time in years, I felt useful in a way that didn't depend on caring for others. I wasn't the selfless mother or the compliant mother-in-law. I was Carol Riley, professional investigator, criminal hunter, and apparently quite intimidating when I set my mind to it. The day of the trial dawned perfectly clear, as if the universe had decided that nothing would overshadow this moment. I dressed in my best navy blue suit, the one I had worn for graduations and important events, and applied makeup with the care of someone who knew they would be on national television. I arrived at the courthouse accompanied by Detective Miller and Attorney Martinez. Reporters were waiting, but I had decided to save my words for where they really mattered, in front of Mike's killers. The courtroom filled up quickly. There were families of the other victims, curious onlookers, law students, and of course Rose with my 3 other sisters for moral support. But my eyes immediately focused on the defendant's table. Savannah had lost weight and her hair looked dull. She was no longer the perfectly groomed woman I had known. Jails have a particular way of revealing people's true nature, and what was left of Savannah was an ordinary woman who had bet everything on a lie and lost. Andrew looked worse. His eyes were those of a cornered animal that knew there was no escape. He kept his head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. Neither of them looked at me when I entered, cowards until the end. The process was efficient. The lawyers presented evidence, experts explained the recordings, and detectives described the criminal operation. Everything was so well documented that the defense basically just asked for clemency. But the moment I had been waiting for arrived when the judge announced, "The court will now hear the victim impact statement from Mrs. Carol Riley." I stood up. I walked toward the stand, and for the first time in weeks, Savannah and Andrew looked up at me. Their expressions were a mixture of shame, fear, and what seemed to me like genuine surprise to see me there, not as the victim they had planned to eliminate, but as the woman who had orchestrated their destruction. I took out my notes, placed them on the podium, and ignored them completely. What I had to say came straight from the heart, and I had been preparing it since the moment I heard their first mocking comment on the recordings. "Your Honor," I began, my voice clear and strong. "Michael Riley was my only son. He was a good, hard-working, and generous man who had the misfortune of falling in love with a lie on legs." Savannah visibly flinched. "These 2 individuals," I continued, pointing directly at them, "didn't just murder my son. They turned his kindness into a weapon against him. They used his love, his trust, and his generous nature to get close enough to kill him. And then they had the audacity to celebrate his death in the house he had bought for his mother." The room was completely silent. Even the reporters had stopped taking notes to listen. "But what is most outrageous to me," my voice grew stronger, "is not just that they killed Mike, it's that they completely underestimated me. They thought I was a silly old woman who would swallow their lies, who would meekly accept being thrown out of my own home, and who would never discover the truth." I looked directly at Savannah. "That was your biggest mistake. You see, I spent 10 years of my life investigating exactly this type of crime. I know every trick, every lie, every tactic that scammers like you use. And when you decided to kill my son and steal my house, you declared war on the wrong person." Andrew had started visibly trembling. "Mike was smart," I continued, "smarter than you imagine. He had discovered your criminal operation and had taken precautions to protect me. From the grave, my son gave me the tools to destroy you." Savannah started making those theatrical sobs she had perfected. Now they were tears of real panic. "And now," I said, my voice dropping to a more personal tone, "I want you to know something. Every day you spend in prison, I want you to remember that you are there because you underestimated a mother's love and the intelligence of a professional investigator." I leaned slightly forward. "You killed my son, but you created your worst nightmare, and that nightmare is me." I stepped back from the microphone and returned to my seat. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the judge seemed impressed. The sentences were announced an hour later. Life without parole for both of them, on 5 counts of first-degree murder. As they were led away in handcuffs for the last time, Savannah looked me directly in the eyes. There was no longer defiance. There was no arrogance. There was only the recognition that she had bet against the wrong person and had lost everything. I left the courthouse feeling lighter than I had felt in months. Justice had been served. Mike had been avenged. And I had discovered something about myself that I never knew. I was much stronger than anyone, including myself, had ever imagined. But above all, I had learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't a dish served cold. Sometimes it's a dish served at exactly the perfect temperature to burn those who deserve it. 6 months after the trial, while reviewing my new office at the district attorney's office in Little Italy, I received a call that made me smile in that particular way that had now made me famous among my colleagues. It was Detective Miller with news about a new case. "Mrs. Riley," he said, "we have a situation that seems to follow the pattern you identified. 45-year-old widow married to a man 10 years younger for 2 years, and now he's pressuring her for full power of attorney. The woman's children are concerned." "Husband's background?" I asked, already taking notes in my new notebook, the one that had Carol Riley, consulting investigator, engraved in gold. Rose had given me that notebook as a joke, but I wore it with pride. "Edward Vance, 35 years old, married 3 times in the last 8 years. 2 of his ex-wives died in domestic accidents, and the third disappeared after liquidating her bank accounts." My blood raced in the way I now recognize as my hunter's instinct activating. "When can I meet the woman?" "This afternoon, if you're available. Her name is Patricia Evans, and she is willing to cooperate with any investigation." 2 hours later, I was sitting in a stylish cafe in the Gaslamp Quarter with Patricia Evans, a beautiful woman who radiated the confusion and fear I could now identify immediately. It was like seeing a version of myself a year ago, before I learned that vulnerability can become the greatest strength if you know how to use it. "Mrs. Riley," Patricia said in a trembling voice, "my children think Edward is only with me for money, but he's so loving, so attentive. I can't believe he's capable of hurting me." "Oh, sweet Patricia. If I had $1 for every time I had heard those exact words in the last few months, I could have bought another office." "Patricia," I told her gently, "tell me exactly how you met Edward." The story was nauseatingly familiar. Edward had appeared in her life at the perfect moment, just when she felt loneliest after her husband's death. He had courted her with the precision of a Swiss clockmaker, saying exactly the right words, showing exactly the right level of interest in her money without seeming too obvious. "Has he asked for money directly?" "Not exactly," Patricia admitted, "but he has mentioned some investments we could make together and says it would be easier if we had joint accounts." "And the power of attorney?" "He says it's just for practicality, in case something happens to either of us. The couples who love each other protect each other that way." I had to restrain myself from rolling my eyes. These criminals really needed a new playbook because they all used the exact same lines. "Patricia," I said, taking out my phone, "I'm going to show you something, but I need you to promise me you won't confront Edward immediately." "Can you promise me that?" She nodded nervously. I showed her the photos Detective Miller had sent. Edward with his 3 previous wives, all in similar poses, all smiling with the same blind happiness I had seen on Patricia's face. "These are Edward's previous wives," I explained calmly. "Maria died in a fall down the stairs after giving him power of attorney. Rose passed away from food poisoning a week after making Edward the beneficiary of her life insurance. And Carol disappeared completely after transferring $800,000 to an account Edward had opened." Patricia turned paper white. "No, it can't be." "Patricia, Edward doesn't love you. Edward is a professional predator who specializes in widows with money. And if we don't act quickly, you are going to become statistic number 4. Tears began to stream down her cheeks, but I recognized immediately that they were not tears of denial. They were tears of recognition. Deep down, Patricia had known something was wrong, but she had preferred to ignore her instincts rather than face the truth. "What can I do?" she whispered. And that's when my job got really interesting. "We are going to set a trap," I said with the smile that now terrorized criminals throughout San Diego, "and you are going to be the perfect bait." For the next 2 hours, Patricia and I planned the operation that would turn Edward Vance into the next permanent guest of the American penitentiary system. It was a beautiful plan in its simplicity and used Edward's arrogance and greed against him in the same way I had used Savannah's and Andrew's. Patricia would return home and act like the loving wife she had been until now. But this time, we would be monitoring every conversation, every movement, and every attempt by Edward to speed up his access to her money. "Isn't it dangerous?" Patricia asked as we finished our coffee. "Patricia," I replied, "the dangerous thing is doing nothing. Edward has already made the decision to kill you. What we are doing is ensuring he is the one who ends up behind bars instead of you in the cemetery. That night, while discreetly installing surveillance devices in Patricia's house, with the help of the DA's technical team, I thought about how my life had changed in less than a year. I had gone from being Carol Riley, the devoted mother and submissive mother-in-law, to being Carol Riley, the consulting investigator that criminals had learned to fear. I had a purpose that went beyond caring for others. I had skills I never knew I possessed. And more importantly, I had the satisfaction of knowing that every criminal I helped catch was one less family that wouldn't have to go through the pain I had lived. Mike would be proud, I thought, as I calibrated the last camera. His death had been turned into the force that would save lives, and Edward Vance was about to discover that he had chosen the wrong victim at the wrong time, because now Patricia had Carol Riley on her side. Poor Edward, he had no idea what was coming. Edward Vance turned out to be even stupider and more predictable than I had hoped, which, considering my recent experience with arrogant criminals, was really saying something. In the 3 days following the installation of our surveillance system, this man managed to incriminate himself in ways that would have impressed even Savannah and Andrew with their lack of subtlety. The first golden recording came the very night of the installation. Patricia had followed my instructions to the letter, acting like the loving wife who was worried about their future together. Edward fell into the trap like a hungry fish. "My love," Patricia told him over dinner, "I've been thinking about what you said about the power of attorney. Maybe you're right. If something happened to me, I want to make sure you have access to everything." Edward's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Patricia, you are so wise. We can go to the notary public tomorrow." But what truly made my day perfect was what Edward didn't know we had captured after that dinner. Patricia had retired early, feigning a headache, and Edward immediately called someone. "It's working perfectly," he was telling his accomplice, a woman whose voice I didn't recognize but whose coldness was familiar. "I have full access to her accounts tomorrow. We can proceed with the final plan next week." "Are you sure she doesn't suspect anything?" the woman asked. "Please, Patricia is as naive as the others. These rich widows are so desperate for love, they see what they want to see. By Friday, we'll have transferred everything, and she'll have had her domestic accident." My blood ran cold, but not from fear. It ran cold from pure, vengeful satisfaction. Edward had just confessed to premeditated murder in high definition. "The usual method," the voice asked. "The usual method. A trip on the stairs, maybe a slip in the shower. Something that looks natural for a woman her age." I had to step away from the monitors for a moment to control the rage I felt. These monsters discussed Patricia's murder as if they were planning what movie to watch over the weekend, but my anger quickly turned into determination. Edward was about to learn that not all naive widows were easy to kill. The next day, while Edward and Patricia visited the notary public to sign the power of attorney documents that, unbeknownst to Edward, had been coordinated with the DA and had no real legal validity, I was coordinating the final phase of our operation. "Detective Miller," I said over the phone, "we need to arrest him before Friday. The recordings confirm he will try to kill her this week. Do we have enough evidence?" "More than enough. Confessions of premeditated murder, discussion of specific methods, and evidence of the previous crimes. This case is going to be easier than Savannah and Andrew's. What's the plan?" "Patricia is going to tell him tonight that she has decided to surprise him with an immediate bank transfer of $500,000 as a gift of love. That will accelerate his timeline and make him commit mistakes." The plan worked even better than expected. That night, when Patricia mentioned the surprise transfer, Edward practically started salivating. He immediately called his accomplice to move the planned murder to the following night. "We can't wait until Friday," he told the woman. "She wants to transfer $500,000 tomorrow. We have to act immediately after the transfer is complete." "Are you sure you can do it that quickly?" "I've perfected the technique. A strategic push on the stairs, she falls and breaks her neck. It will look completely accidental." The coldness with which he described the process made me realize Edward had done this so many times he had completely lost any trace of humanity. He was a pure predator, and predators like him deserved nothing less than cages. On Thursday night, as Edward prepared to commit what he thought would be the perfect crime, I was in a surveillance van outside the house with a full team from the San Diego PD. Patricia wore a wireless microphone. We had installed additional cameras on the stairs and had marksmen positioned with tranquilizer weapons in case things got complicated. "Mrs. Riley," Detective Miller said, "are you sure Patricia can handle this psychologically?" "Patricia is stronger than she looks," I replied, monitoring the cameras on my laptop. "Besides, when you know someone is planning to kill you, it's amazing how much strength you can find." At 9:30 p.m., Patricia started walking up the stairs toward her bedroom, following the script we had rehearsed exactly. Edward followed her, and I could see on the cameras how he strategically positioned himself on the perfect step to push her. But what Edward didn't know was that Patricia had been practicing for days how to fall safely, and there were strategically placed cushions just outside the camera range. Edward raised his hands toward Patricia's back. "Now," I shouted over the radio. The doors of the house burst open simultaneously from 3 different directions. The assault team moved like a perfectly calibrated machine. Edward froze, with his hands still raised toward Patricia, captured in the act of attempted murder. "Edward Vance," Detective Miller shouted, "you are under arrest for attempted murder, first-degree murder, and fraud." The expression on Edward's face was almost comical. Total confusion, terror, and then a slow understanding that he had been completely outmaneuvered by the women he had underestimated. Patricia turned to him with a smile she had been practicing. "Edward, darling," she said in a sweet voice, "meet Carol Riley. She's a professional investigator, and she's been helping me plan your arrest." I stepped out of the shadows, where I had been observing the entire operation. "Hello, Edward," I said calmly. "I hope you enjoyed these last few days of freedom, because they are going to be the last you see for a very, very long time." Edward tried to speak, probably to deny everything, but no sound came out. He just stood there, handcuffed and trembling, finally understanding that he had fallen into a trap as perfect as the ones he used to set. As they took him away, Patricia approached me with tears in her eyes. "Carol, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life." "Patricia," I replied, "you saved your own life by being brave enough to accept the truth and act on it. I just gave you the tools." That night, driving home after completing another successful operation, I realized something that made me smile all the way to my door. Edward had been my 5th solved case in 6 months. The silly old woman Savannah had underestimated had become the most successful consulting investigator for the district attorney's office. Mike would have been proud. His death had been turned into the force that would protect other families from going through the same pain. And the best part of all was that every criminal I arrested was one more proof that underestimating Carol Riley was the most costly mistake anyone could make. A year after the day Savannah had kicked me out of my own house, I woke up in my new apartment in Little Italy, a place I had chosen myself, decorated to my taste, and paid for with my work as a consulting investigator. The irony was not lost on me. The attempt to destroy my life had resulted in the creation of a better life than I had ever imagined possible. My phone rang as I prepared my morning coffee. It was Attorney Martinez with news they had been waiting for months. "Carol," she said, "they just confirmed the final sentences. Edward Vance, life without parole. His accomplice, Ellen Vance, 30 years. And there's more news about Savannah and Andrew." My heart raced. "What kind of news?" "The international investigation your case triggered has resulted in arrests in Colombia, Panama, and Costa Rica. The criminal operation was much larger than we thought. There were at least 15 people involved in an international murder for money network." I sat heavily in my favorite chair, the one I had bought specifically because it was comfortable for reading case files. 15 people? Your son was not the victim of a local criminal couple, Carol. He was the victim of a sophisticated operation that had been running for over a decade. The recordings you provided were the key that allowed Interpol to dismantle the entire network. I closed my eyes, feeling a mix of horror and satisfaction. Mike had died, but his death had led to potentially saving hundreds of future lives. "How many confirmed victims?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. 27 confirmed murders in the last 10 years, all following the same pattern: researching potential victims, strategic courtship, marriage, access to finances, and elimination. 27 families who had gone through the same pain as me. 27 sons, fathers, brothers who had been murdered for money. The magnitude of the horror left me speechless for several minutes. Carol, are you there? Yes, attorney, just processing. There's something else. The government wants to officially recognize your contribution to the investigation. They are going to present your case as a model at international organized crime conferences. After hanging up, I sat in my living room, looking out the window toward a view of Balboa Park. In 1 year, I had gone from being a potential victim to being the investigator who had helped dismantle an international criminal network. It was surreal. My phone vibrated with a text message from Patricia Evans. Carol, Edward was sentenced today. Life without parole. I can't thank you enough. You are my hero. I smiled. Patricia was now the 5th woman I had helped save from predators like Edward. Every case was different, but the pattern was always the same. Criminals who underestimated their victims and an investigator who had learned to turn that arrogance into their destruction. That afternoon, I had an important appointment. The director of the district attorney's office, Director Thompson, had asked to meet with me to discuss expanding my consulting program. Apparently, the results had been so successful that they wanted to create an entire department based on my methods. Mrs. Riley, Director Thompson said when I arrived at his office, in 1 year, you have solved more cases of marital fraud and murder for money than any investigator in the history of this institution. I had personal motivation, I replied. Yes, and that motivation has become a methodology we want to implement nationally. Would you be interested in directing a new department specializing in this type of crime? It was tempting. An entire department, unlimited resources, the opportunity to institutionalize the war that had begun, in my living room a year ago. But I also knew that my effectiveness came precisely from my independence and my personal connection to the victims. Director, I said after careful consideration, I accept expanding my consultancy, but under my own conditions. I want to maintain my independence, choose my cases, and work directly with the victims without bureaucracy. What do you propose? A semi-independent unit. I train investigators in my methods, but I maintain complete operational control. And I want Patricia Evans to be my first trainee. Patricia Evans? The woman you helped save from Edward Vance? She was a forensic accountant before she got married. She wants to dedicate her life to helping other women like us. The director smiled. A unit led by victims who became hunters. I like the symmetry. That night, as I celebrated my new project with Rose and my sisters at my favorite restaurant, I received an unexpected call. The number was unfamiliar. Carol Riley. The voice was a young woman's, nervous. Yes, who is this? My name is Anna Jones. I'm a reporter for the LA Times. I'm writing an article about your work, and I was wondering if I could interview you. Anna Jones. The last name sounded familiar. Are you related to Savannah Jones? A long pause. Savannah is my oldest sister. My breath caught. Your sister? Anna, I need to talk to you. There are things about Savannah's family that didn't come out in the trial, things that could help in other cases. My mind raced. Was more family involved in the criminal operation? Was Anna a complicit or a victim? Was this called genuine or a trap? Anna, I said carefully, why do you want to help? Savannah is your sister. Why? Her voice cracked. Savannah killed my husband too 4 years ago, and I could never prove it until I saw the news of your case. The circle was closing in a way I'd never anticipated. The sister of Mike's killer wanted to help me catch more criminals from the same network. Anna, I said, can you come to my office tomorrow? We have a lot to talk about. After hanging up, I sat at the restaurant processing this new revelation. A year after Savannah had tried to destroy my life, her own sister was coming to help me destroy more criminals like her. Justice had a very particular sense of humor. Rose looked at me with concern. Carol, everything okay? More than okay, sis, I replied, raising my wine glass. I think my war against predators like Savannah and Andrew is just beginning. That night, driving home through the streets of San Diego that I now saw completely differently, I thought about Mike. His death had been turned into a force for justice that had saved lives and dismantled an international criminal network. But more importantly, it had turned his mother from a victim into a warrior. And this warrior was just warming up. When I arrived at my apartment, I found a letter slipped under my door. It had no sender, just my name written in familiar handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands. Carol, I hope you're enjoying your moment of glory. But this isn't over. There are people who aren't happy with what you did, and criminal networks have long memories. Be careful. A concerned friend. I smiled as I read the veiled threat. After a year of turning arrogant criminals into permanent residents of the penitentiary system, threats had lost their power to intimidate me. In fact, they excited me because they meant I was doing exactly the right job, bothering exactly the right people, and winning exactly the wars worth fighting. Mike had raised a fighter, and his killer had awakened a hunter. Poor international criminal network. They had no idea what Carol Riley had prepared for them. The war had ended, Carol Riley had won, but the hunt was just beginning.